Hey guys, Field Agent Reaper here with the full in-depth advanced pinhead guide. We'll be going over the basic and advanced strategies with the Cenobite to make you a great pinhead player, or at least get you on the road to learning how to play pinhead, understand his power a bit better, and maybe not struggle as much with him in your own games. Pinhead is a very misunderstood killer, and many seem to think he's either extremely overpowered or very weak. I've never seen such a split on a killer's strength in this game, so this guide should help you understand what he's capable of and the full extent of his power. Now, I'm going to be breaking this guide down into parts, so I'm going to actually end up timestamping every single section. So if there's a very particular part that you're looking to understand about his power, you can skip to it. Or if you just want to watch the whole thing, then obviously that's just going to keep rolling. But we're going to actually start with the power. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how his power works. His power is split into two parts. The first part being the possessed chain, aka his M2, and the Lament Configuration, aka box. So, the possessed chain is also split into two parts. Yes, this is a very complex power, but it's important to talk about each part respectively. The gateway is exactly how a nurse blink works with the flannel add-on. If you don't know what the flannel add-on for nurse is, when you equip it, it actually shows you exactly where you're going to blink. Pinhead's power works exactly the same way. There is pretty much zero difference to this. It goes through walls, it can be placed anywhere above and below the player, and it can be placed up to 60 meters away from the player. Once the gateway is placed, your camera transitions to its position, which will always take 0.5 seconds, and is unaffected by the casting distance. You can then remain into it for up to 6 seconds, and then have the choice to either cancel it or initiate a chain strike. The chain strike. Once you fire the possessed chain, it will initially come out at a rather slow speed, but will greatly speed up after a moment. If the chain strikes a player, they become chain bound. Chain bound applies the hindered status effect, and the more chains that are on the player, the slower the player moves. This is actually something not a lot of people are aware of, so keep that in mind as that's really important. When you hit someone with the possessed chain, it will always attach 3 chains to that survivor, and the survivor must then begin the chain break action. Each chain requires 1 second to snap, so normally it will take 3 seconds to snap all 3 chains. The survivor may also use the environment to break these chains. When the chain makes contact with the environment, it will instantly snap. When this happens, however, another AI chain will spawn in and attempt to bind the survivor. The Lament Configuration, or the box, is the reason Pinhead is so strong. This mechanic prevents survivors from doing gens, healing, and causes what I like to call total global control. At the start of the trial, a 90-second timer starts, which is visible around survivors on the HUD. There are several things that can occur during this time. If the 90-second timer ends, the blue chains around the survivors that fill up, then the chain hunt activates. If a survivor picks up the box, this will pause the chain hunt timer for all survivors except the one holding the box. This survivor will then gain the oblivious status effect and therefore not hear the killer's tear radius. This survivor may then begin to solve the box, which by default will take 6 seconds, modifiable with add-ons, and missing a skill check while solving adds 1 extra second to the solve timer. Hitting a great skill check can remove a very small time from this total time, usually less than a second, and this becomes more important if the Pinhead player is running solve time add-ons. If the survivor solves the box, the chain hunt timer is fully reset, and the box goes into a 45-second cooldown period before it will respawn back on the map. Pinhead is notified with a custom killer instinct when the box is being solved. He can teleport while looking at the killer instinct, which will take 3 seconds to commence. During this time, the survivor is held in place by the box. After the teleport finishes, the box is considered solved and goes into a 45-second cooldown before respawning. Side note, Pinhead will always be facing the survivor after teleporting and will be anywhere from 10 to 12 meters from where the survivor is standing. When Pinhead downs the survivor holding the box, he will immediately pick up the box and solve it. This is very important to another piece of information I'm going to share later, so please keep that in mind. Pinhead can also pick up the box by finding it on the ground. Whenever Pinhead solves the box by this method, a 10-second timer begins and then the chain hunt activates. The box then immediately respawns on the map fully charged, ready to be picked up again. This also occurs when you take the box from a survivor when they are holding it. Keep in mind that whenever Pinhead solves the box, all survivors not currently on hooks, in lockers, or in the dying state on the ground will have their locations revealed and instantly bound by 3 chains. While Chain Hunt is active, AI chains will spawn in cycles. 3 chains over 12 seconds, followed by a 9 to 12-second grace period, then the cycle repeats. This grace period is ignored if a action, such as healing, doing gens, or totems, is attempted. Some strategies to talk about. So first, I'm going into the first advanced strategy with Pinhead, and is the most asked about thing that everybody wants to know all the time, and that is box logic. Box logic. Most people don't actually know this, but the location where the box spawns is not random. There's a system in place that you can take advantage of, and with a bit of learning and experience, make you a much better Pinhead player. A lot better Pinhead player. I cannot stress that enough. Learning this mechanic will mean the difference between being a good or a bad Pinhead player. This mechanic can save you in many matches, which is done for me multitude of times. So now I'm going to explain exactly how it works. Imagine a 40-meter circle around Pinhead and a 16-meter circle around all 4 survivors. The box looks at these circles and tries to spawn as far away from these as possible. I also want to add very quickly that what I'm saying is technically correct, but I'm not going into the super duper specifics about this system because it will just confuse people who want to understand how to do this as easily as possible. But it does spawn the box as far away as possible, but it's not necessarily always going to be in the absolute farthest spawn location. And briefly, what I mean, if you don't care about the very specifics of box logic and just want to know how to do it, you can skip this part. But for those who actually want to know, it actually looks at all the potential spawns that are outside of the circle ranges around all 5 characters inside of the match, picks one of those spots and puts it there. But most often that is going to be the farthest spot from you, but it's not necessarily always going to actually be the farthest away, but it will be one of the selected locations that is far away from you, that is outside of the 40-meter circle around Pinhead and 16-meter circle around survivors. Yeah, I know, a mouthful, but that's why I said if you don't care about this kind of information, you can just skip it and just pay attention to every other part of box logic, and you should actually be able to learn and understand it just fine. When spawning into a match, the game will spawn survivors as far away from you as possible, usually more than 32 meters on average, which is usually across the map. This is so incredibly common that you can walk up to the closest 40-meter location from you that is not across the map and find the box and get a quick chain hunt. If you do not find the box at the start with this method, it is extremely likely that a survivor has spawned within this location. So usually you either get a chain hunt or a chase within 10 seconds of the game starting. An example of this is here on Resting Place. I spawn in the corner here with Lethal being our training wheel perk for this, as you don't need this perk a bit later for box logic once you fully understand the mechanic. I can see all survivors on the other side of the map. With this info in mind, the closest 40-meter point away from us that is not near survivors would actually be on our side of the map in the other corner. If we walk over there, the box is here. Now, when it comes to doing this after the start of the game, when you pick up the box, all survivors will reveal their locations with a scream. Use these scream bubbles as a makeshift lethal. The box will respawn with the same rules in mind every single time. Now, if you don't have this kind of info, but you do know where all the survivors are, for example, one player being on hook, someone is running over to the unhook, and a player is just popped a gen or made a noise notification in another location, and the box is freshly respawned, you can calculate where the box might be using your game sense. Pinhead has a very strong influence on where the box will spawn because of his massive 40-meter circle around him. So when picking up the box and all survivors are far away, you can move away from the corner where you have picked up the box. And if you are more than 40 meters away from that corner after the 10-second period after picking up the box before the chain hunt starts, there is a very good chance the box will spawn right back in that corner and force survivors to have to run across the map to solve it. In this situation, you also know where the box is, and you can easily leave chase if someone is going for the box and intercept it and then steal it, keeping the chain hunt going for even longer. When you know where the box is, you don't always want to pick it up. Sometimes it's better to contest the general area around 32 to 40 meters away from the box, as someone else will then have to go and pick up the box, keeping 2 players busy. When the box is then picked up, immediately drop chase and head to the location where you know or think you know where the box is. Downing the player with the box not only gives you a hook, but it keeps the chain hunt going and consistently prevents the entire team from doing gens while you are taking 1v1 chases. Doing this also breaks survivors' morale, which can be the reason you win the game. Nothing feels worse than a survivor player getting irritated at a constant chain hunt, keeping them from doing gens, healing, or anything else. Once you have mastered this mechanic, you can do this at the start of the game without lethal, and the amount of people absolutely shocked that you can do this without lethal is downright hilarious. The other advanced tactics I want to talk about are chain flicks and gateway placements. If there were two things that would separate you from the bad pinhead players, it would be box logic and what I like to call reaction chains. Reaction chaining is when you're able to make quick reactions to what a survivor is doing and make good chain strikes on those players to maximize value from your M2s. In this clip, the Vito is going to make this pallet in the loop, so my only response is to try to M2 him. Now, what most pinhead players are going to do here is either not use their M2, or two, just shoot the chain straight through the pallet. This is a mistake, as when the pallet comes down and he starts to make his way to the left, the chains will all break. This is where bad pinhead players will go on Reddit and forums complaining that pinhead sucks and blame the killer rather than their own ability to recognize they just suck. So, what do you do in this situation? Well, I place my gateway on the other side of the pallet in front of the survivor and chain bind him from the other side of the loop. Because of this, I'm able to walk around this pallet, which against a basic M1 killer is pretty safe, and get a hit. Aim for the legs always. When going for chain hits, even if you're placing the gateway on their body every time, aim down. The reason you want to aim down is two reasons. Number one, if you miss for some reason, the chain will hit the ground and kick you out of your power. If you launch the chain and it flies into space when you miss, you waste a lot more time when this happens. Second, if you place the chain in front of the survivor when trying to back rev them and you're aiming down, the first few frames of the chain are very slow, and because of this might be slow enough that the survivor may actually just run into the chain. Now, this is a little dependent on ping, but this usually works. If you point the chain straight, there is a chance that it might just outrun them. It's a good habit to do this because the survivor hitbox is a pill, so hitting them in the legs is no different than hitting them in the head or chest, unless you're aiming way too high or there's any sort of hill or difference in going upstairs or downstairs, anything like that. So just aim for the legs every single time if you can help it. With that in mind, I'm now going to talk about probably the most fun and engaging part of his power. It's the different attack strategies when using the possessed chain and loops. So the first attack type I simply call chain backrevving, similar to the idea of getting real close to someone as Billy, then charging your chainsaw on their back and getting an instant hit. This will be the most common attack type you do with Pinhead in all of your matches. You want to place the gateway as close to the player's back as possible and instantly send the chain every time. This minimizes the time spent in the gateway and allows you to gain the best distance on survivors. Another thing that will help you land M2s is tracking the player while the gateway is transitioning. A slowed down example of this here with this Meg. You can see as I'm placing the gateway and my camera is transitioning from Pinhead over to the gateway, I am tracking the survivor by rotating my camera and keeping eye contact with that player. This is exactly what you want to do every time you're about to chain bind a player. Sometimes you won't need to do this if you're simply running in a straight line and following behind a survivor and you drop the chain on their back, but this skill is exceptionally helpful when trying to M2 a player when walking around a loop and not in a straight line of sight. Bad pinheads will place their gateway, then after it's placed, rotate the gateway to track the survivor. This wastes time and gives the survivor more time to react to your gateway, as they can clearly see where it's placed and know that you're obviously trying to line up a shot. This leads to chain flicking. This is when you place a gateway but are not looking right at the survivor for whatever reason and flick the gateway and immediately launch the chain. This is mostly just a time saver and once again gives survivor less time to react, because the more time you spend in the gateway, the more time they can do goofy movements and avoid your chain buying them more time to move away from you. As a quick example, I place my gateway here but don't have immediate view on the Nancy. However, I know where she is and I flick over to her, chain binding her and getting the kill because of it. This is helpful, especially when trying to hit people through walls, which is something a lot of pinheads also don't take advantage of. Is really something that you really should take advantage of. It's part of his power, and it's something that actually makes him very strong. One thing I almost never see other pinheads do is take advantage of the fact that you can place gateways through walls and hit players with the M2. I can make an entire video about this alone because of how much meat there is to this mechanic, but for the sake of not having this guide be any longer than it needs to be, I'll only include good talking points and things you should consider or focus on. This is something I 100% encourage players to start learning how to do because 1, it's really fun, and 2, if you start getting good at it and implementing other good habit M2 strats combined with the wall bangs, you start to open up a lot of options to make a lot cooler plays. This is something that will take practice, especially if you don't have a very fast reaction time, because what makes using this part of the kit strong is that normally the survivors will not see this coming. Seeing Pinhead's hand come up is the sign that you need to get ready to avoid the chain. You can't do that if Pinhead is using a wall as a line of sight breaker. Some survivors who pay attention might look out for this and actually make this very hard to pull off, especially if you're not stupidly accurate and fast. If you run into someone doing this, then it's best to play the zoning game, as they will become paranoid of getting hit and make weird plays to avoid a possible incoming wallbang that never ends up happening, allowing you to W key somebody down. The best way to practice this and get better at wallbangs is to understand survivor pathing in the many tiles of this game, and try to get the survivor to almost walk into your gateway. This is much easier to do on mouse because you can spin your camera around much faster than a controller player, so I wish my controller gamers luck on this part, as this is probably one of those times that PC will have an advantage. And if you know survivor pathing, start going for hits and full send. Don't be scared to miss because sometimes you will. I do, but the more you do it, the better and faster you will get at knowing the muscle memory. Eventually, it just becomes a habit, and when you get to any specific tile you have practiced this on, you will know exactly how to replicate a specific hit almost every time. Keep at it. You also want to insta-send the chain and the gateway as fast as humanly possible for another reason as well, because typically you can't place the gateway inside of a survivor, but the thing is, it technically can be placed inside of them and shoot the chain, because once your camera actually starts to transition over to where the gateway is, even if the survivor runs on top of it, it will still place no matter what. So even if you aren't actually going to be able to place it directly on top of them in the first place, you actually want to try to predict where they're going to move by, I'd say, a few inches or a foot or so, because of the fact that by the time they run into the gateway where you think they're actually going to be, you'll be able to actually spawn the chain directly inside of the survivor, making it so there is absolutely zero downtime between placing the gateway and the chain actually flying at the survivor, giving you the most distance. Go ahead and practice this as well. This is a little bit hard to pull off for some Pinhead players, but you want to predict where they're going to be by at least a foot, because if they run into the gateway as you actually start transferring your point of view towards the gate, you'll be able to instantly hit them and waste zero time.
Gamble didn't pay off, but you didn't lose much by trying. That was insane. He spawned that chain inside her brain.
Many people say don't chain outside of loops. That's partially incorrect. The main reason people don't recommend it is because you lose a lot of distance when you miss the chain. On the other hand, if you place the gateway inside of the survivor, they usually have no chance. M2 only has a 6-second cooldown. You can use that to get a hit out in the open, or prevent them from transitioning to another tile. An example, clearly see the survivor looking forward. She heads to the other tile, but because of my M2, I'm forcing her to play cow tree, and I actually go ahead and get the hit and the down because of it, even though I was quite far away because of a well-placed chain. Now, don't be afraid to do this because of the fact that even if they're a bit farther away, sometimes that first chain is going to slow them down enough so that the follow-up chain will actually get the hit on them. It is worth it to stack your M2 hits. It will benefit you in the long run. Just make sure to keep your eye on clutter and make sure that the survivor is in a position that you can go ahead and actually M2 them and they're not paying attention super hard, because sometimes people are going to actually try to juke your M2, especially if they're looking behind them in chase and they see you try to line up a prep shot. So just be aware of that. The next attack type is chain sweep. You will normally do this on a junk type loop with a pallet in the middle of it. This can also be done on jungle gyms as well, but I'm just using the junk tiles as an example. You can take advantage of this pallet and simply walk through the pallet, but as you do this, very quickly send a chain to your side over the loop and bind them, then continue walking around and hit that player. Now, if the survivor has control of the pallet in this situation, this will make the loop unsafe instantly. The reason for this is because you have a few options based on what they do in reaction to your M2. Normally, you just want to hit them head on and force them into a situation where they have to camp the pallet. Most of the time, if you walk up to them, they will drop the pallet. Play into this every time, fake walking into the pallet, but instantly walk around, as if they drop the pallet, they are pretty much guaranteed dead. They will either slow vault over the pallet and you can meet them back on your side, or they'll attempt to walk around the loop while bound and get the hit anyways. Now, if the survivor is smart and they don't drop the pallet, there's almost no reason to walk through and hit them unless you're feeling a little colorful and ballsy, but normally they'll panic, or if they are console omega lol, they will drop the pallet, because imagine having every single action bound to one button. Yeah, I made him fall back in! I made him... I'm sorry, I had to. I mean, come on. You can't tell me this isn't funny every single time.
Oh no, don't do that.
Console player detected. The other chain type that you will use are curve chains and surprise gateways. This chain type is the most outrageous type, and you will never see other pinheads do either of these, so if you pull these off on a player, you'll absolutely mind fuck them. Curve chains normally come from placing a gateway at a corner out of view from the survivor, then launching the chain and curving the chain around a corner into the survivor. Another take on this is surprise gateways. This is when you are in a loop with the survivor, or when the survivor is playing around some sort of structure, and you place the gateway at the most horrendous location far out from the loop, then launch the chain into the loop, hitting the survivor. This is probably the funniest thing you can do with Pinhead, as it makes people lose their minds, especially if you do this and run Grease Lens, and be able to see them panic through the walls. Bet I could just stand here and I'll kill her. Another type of attack that you can do is what I like to call the window side sweep attack. So when you're actually chasing someone and they're going for a window, a lot of Pinhead players just like to go ahead and try to shoot the chain directly through the window, hitting the survivor as they vault. This is typically not the best option because of the fact that one singular chain, and sometimes two, will be sticking through the window, and all it takes is that survivor to walk to one side, which everyone is going to do, and it will instantly snap that chain. And usually they can get all those chains off super fast because of that. They'll start breaking a chain, the first chain will snap, that progress will carry over to the second chain, and they'll basically only have to essentially deal with one actual chain. Now, this isn't always a bad idea, but the only time I would actually encourage this is if you're running impaling wire. But if you're not running impaling wire, you want to go ahead and actually put the chain to the side of the window. You actually want to put your gateway through the window and basically shoot the chain at them as they start vaulting over, because then the chains will all be on the other side of the wall and you won't have to worry about any of them snapping on the environment unless there's some sort of weird tree or something that's almost touching the window, which is pretty uncommon. But if that is the case, then you actually want to then go ahead and put the chain ahead of the player and then basically have them jump straight into the gateway and then hit them. And then usually this will end up allowing you to actually mind game them or walk around the window of some sort and get a hit. Another piece of advice that I want to give is you want to pay attention to certain signs that survivors are giving you when they're playing against you and looping you. For example, in this clip here, this Serena is staying on this hill and waiting till I get closer to actually jump off the hill. So I know she's going to use balance landing. If you can predict something like this, you can actually stop them like I do to this Serena in this clip. Same thing with sprint burst. If a survivor is looking at you and still walking as you're approaching, it's pretty clear that they have sprint burst. So start pre-charging your gateway and actually get ready to completely deny them of the hit. Same thing with life as well. If they're just looking forward at the window and look like they're going to pre-vault it no matter what, even if it's at an angle that would be very awkward, pre-charge your gateway and get ready to basically hit them right after they vault. And even if you think they have dead hard, you can pre-charge your gateway and hit them even if you're within range to M1 them, and it will just completely deny them. These are the kinds of plays that get you a lot of value in games, so pay attention to those signs and actually get those really good plays. When teleporting to the box, if you time correctly, you can actually start charging your gateway early. You can press your M2 the absolute second you TP to start casting your gateway. If the survivor is not by a window or a pallet, you'll almost definitely get a hit on them with the possessed chain. This can be a little hard, but with the right practice, you can get it down pretty easily, as I can do it about 90% of the time now. And speaking of teleporting, what is the best time to use your teleport? Well, the teleport can be very helpful at times and can be used for different situations. Some pinheads are very one-sided with this mechanic and they'll either always TP or never TP. This is not good and you're wasting potential with this mechanic. The first big thing to consider is a lot of people will solve the box when you're chasing a survivor. When this starts happening, consider the following. Is the survivor you are chasing giving you a hard time? Is the survivor who is solving in an area you want to defend or leave alone? Is the survivor you're chasing going to be an easy down? Is the person who is solving in a dangerous location or in a dead zone, or are they injured or are they on death hook? Sometimes I will use the TP right after I down a player and create slug pressure. Someone now needs to come and pick up the slug, and I'm chasing another player immediately. This is 3/4 of the survivors occupied and creates great pressure, and something you don't see a lot of pinheads do. But it is a tool that you can use, and it is actually very helpful. If I start the game and begin a chase with a survivor and they're giving me a very good run or running maybe me on a tile that is actually very hard to chase, then maybe I want to use the TP to instantly switch targets and get a fresh chase. This normally works out and allows me to down the player who was solving the box. If the person I am currently chasing is most likely to go down in the next few moments, then you probably want to ignore the teleport, especially if it's very far away. Now, if the survivor isn't far away, you may actually want to consider leaving the current chase that you're in to actually try and interrupt the box. This is probably one of the most important things to get a good understanding of when doing box logic and box hunting, because there are going to be times that you should absolutely leave your chase or completely diverge whatever you were currently doing and try to stop the box. This is a bit difficult though sometimes because survivors are going to sometimes try to hide, people are going to try to body block, and there's all sorts of different things that could go wrong when this happens. So it's good to start to practice this and kind of get a good understanding of the different scenarios that can happen when interrupting the box. But when you're box juggling, survivors aren't going to make it easy for you, especially if they recognize what you're doing. They're going to start trying to get creative. So this is why it's good to also pair certain add-ons with perks when doing this to basically make it easier. I always use Frank's Heart and Larry's Remains to assist with this, but it's something to really keep in mind. Otherwise, you're never going to be successful at box juggling and box logic in general. And while at times it may feel like it's a piece of cake to stop someone solving the box, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is don't overcommit to the box. I've made this mistake, and every once in a while I still make this mistake. I overestimate how good or bad a particular player I'm chasing is, and I end up spending way too much time chasing the person with the box. And yes, I usually get the box from them when I down them at some point during the chase, but too much time has passed and too much progress has been put onto generators, and it puts me in an even worse position where if something like that happens again, I might just straight up lose the game because of it. So if you feel like you're chasing someone and they're actually doing way too good of a job, maybe you're messing up a little too much, just leave. You will be way better off if you just leave the chase and come back to that person later and maybe get someone else when they pick up the box. It's just better this way. Don't overcommit to the box. Because if you overcommit to the box, you're gonna end up like Nina does right here, in this perfect example of a meme clip.
I'm searching it. I'm searching it. I'm trying to, but the ping. I got a key.
Nice.
I got a key with a star.
Okay, good,
I
good,
got a
good.
key with a bunny on it.
I like the bunny.
The box. You opened it. I came.
Also, a small little tip that I recently discovered by playing on Ultra Graphics is that you can see the box electricity from up to 32 meters away way easier. Now, some of you want to be smartasses and be like, oh my god, wow, increasing graphics makes graphics easier to see. I guarantee you that most people had never considered this. Also, considering that most players play on low graphics on PC, most people actually don't know this. Big shocker. Most people did not know this. Going back to looping with Pinhead, one really great tip for a free hit on a player during a chain hunt is when you see an AI gateway spawning in when you're chasing a survivor on a short tile or a junk tile. Force them around the loop so that the survivor is almost touching that portal when it spawns. It will instantly grab them and you'll almost always have enough speed to be able to hit them at this point. Because of the way that the chains spawn in, when a survivor is very close to it, they're not going to be able to avoid it. They have to at least be a few meters away to actually be able to avoid the chain. So if this ever happens, definitely take advantage of this, and this will almost always get you hits on survivors, and you won't even have to use your M2 at this point. And a similar tip to this, which is a bit more luck-based, is breaking the chains on a survivor and then hitting them with your basic attack. Creating a chance for the new chains that are going to spawn in and grab the survivor because they're technically broken on the environment. It will then eat up their speed boost and pretty much allow you to two-tap that player. And I know we spoke about placing the gateways through walls earlier, but I also want to tag on a few more things about that. Using the chains above and below floors. This is both great for getting info on survivors and just creating some panic. If you're on Midwich or the game and you don't want to walk all the way over to a gen to check it for whatever reason, but you need to see if it's being worked on, use the chain for that info. If you hit someone on a gen on a different floor with a chain, sometimes that will scare them off the gen as they don't know where you are or what you're doing. This is also nice in endgame when needing to check doors. The amount of times I was able to catch a survivor trying to sneak to a door because of the UAV chain flying overhead.
UAV online.
Is hilarious. Now, you don't want to do this all the time, at least before endgame, but it is something to keep in mind that saves a lot of time and can be actually very handy. Also, using the chains on different floors and levels can be super helpful when going for players. For example, this clip of me interrupting the box because I placed the gateway on this hill and shot the chain over the wall into the survivor allowed me to get the hit and interrupt this person. I wouldn't have been able to do this if I hadn't used the environment to my advantage. And the last special trick to add, something I'm still working on myself and is really hard to do but can be super helpful, is you can frame perfect place gateways in midair. When channeling the gateway, move up or down a level, you can place it right before it fully settles on the floor and hit a player from above. Well, why is this helpful? When a chain is in the air and attaches to a player from above, it is less likely that it will snap on the environment. It's hard to do and works on maps that have areas or structures that have multi-levels like main buildings and such, but it's something to keep in mind. High ground chains are almost always more helpful than floor chains. Something to add to this as well that I wanted to talk about is when you actually M2 a player and the 3 chains spawn in, that first chain that you're controlling will always be the first one to snap. This is important because if you snap that chain, the progress towards breaking that chain actually carries over to the next chain and will actually help them break out faster. So you want to try to not break that first chain if you can't help it, because that chain is also the one that slows them down the most and applies the biggest slowdown because of the total of 3 chains slowing a survivor down. Try not to break the first chain if you can help it. And the last advanced tip for Pinhead before moving on to add-ons and perks is zoning. Sometimes you'll get a player who gets a bit wise and starts dodging your chains and trying to avoid your backrev chains. If someone is actually getting smart with you, fake them out by pulling out your hand and putting it away. Don't hold it out for too long though, as you do move quite a bit slower while holding your gateway out. This won't happen as often, as most survivors will just W key away from you, but every once in a while they will, so take advantage of it and it will get you a lot of hits even on better players. And now going over what I believe to be the best and worst perks on Pinhead. We're going to try to go through this as quickly as we can because it is a very large list of perks. I'm now re-recording this as of the time of the unknown coming out, so keep in mind that these are all subject to change. In fact, some of my placements have changed since my original list, but starting from S tier, everything is an S tier because it all directly benefits off Pinhead's either chain hunt or his ability to M2 people from a distance. Some of the best perks are going to be things like barbecue and chili and lethal, which help you find the box. Rapid brutality is up there because it's, well, incredibly good. If you're using Pinhead's power constantly, you're never going to get bloodlust anyways, so being able to be 5% faster in chase constantly is actually really, really nice. And a lot of these others are just really good slowdowns. Surge is really good on Pinhead because every attack that he downs people with is always going to be an M1. And then perks like Agitation are in here because Agitation has a very nice niche effect with Pinhead, where when you take the box from a player and then you pick them up and you have Agitation, as long as nobody else is in the corner that you downed a particular player holding the box with, and you walk them out of that corner as fast as you can with Agitation, there's a good chance you can force the box to spawn right back in that corner using Agitation. Not to mention, it's just a nice perk. Dead Man Switch is amazing on Pinhead because the chain hunt pulls people off gens and it blocks them. Really, really nice. And then I threw in Plaything in there because Plaything pairs amazing with Pinhead's power. It's such a good perk and it's just a great utility as well. Ultimate Weapon, as of the way it is right now, is really, really good, but I'm gonna be honest, that's probably gonna change after this next patch. And then everything else, Grim Embrace got buffed, it's super strong. That probably won't stay that way forever. And Sloppy Butcher actually got pushed down into A tier. It's still good on Pinhead, but it's no longer an S tier perk in my opinion, because instead of basically people staying injured and having those effects from Sloppy applied as long as they're injured, it's only on there for a limited time now. So you're actually going to lose out on that, and potentially people can start to heal through a chain hunt instead of basically infinitely draining their health. I really would go through every single one of these perks, but it would just take too much time, so you can just have a really good look at everything that I have right here. This is approximately what I believe to be some of the most accurate ratings for all of these perks on Pinhead. And by the way, Save the Best for Last is bugged on Pinhead, so that's why I put it below F tier, because it just doesn't work correctly right now. If you hit somebody with your M2, it actually removes stacks, and using your M2 at all also removes play with your food stacks, so it's not even worth running that either. Even though play with your food isn't that good on Pinhead to begin with, it's really not worth it right now. And then at the very, very bottom, I have Franklin's and Hoarder. Neither of these work with Pinhead's power anymore. And by the way, Franklin's was never good on Pinhead. Everybody who said that this was a good perk on Pinhead, you were wrong 100% of the time. Only bad players ran Franklin's on Pinhead, not because it was a crutch perk, but because it was the easy way. You hindered yourself for a little bit of an advantage instead of being able to actually get good with the power. And Hoarder was amazing on Pinhead. And in fact, I think it was overpowered. I actually think Hoarder, before it got changed on Pinhead and all killers that had special items in game, I think it was actually overpowered on Pinhead. If I ever wanted to not try, I would throw in double solve time and Hoarder, and I don't think I ever lost a single game where I ran that combination of add-ons with Hoarder. It was that free, especially if it was on a smaller map. If you picked up the box, you were dead. You were 100% dead. I would know where you would be, and you would have to spend 9 seconds solving the box, so you were pretty much screwed. And of course, just a quick little mention again about Franklin's. The reason why I always thought it was bad was, here's the situation. You're chasing somebody with the box. You have Franklin's. You knock the box out of their hand. What did every Pinhead do with Franklin's? they would instantly pick it up and solve it. Now the chain hunt starts. That's a good thing, right? Well, yes, but the thing is that pinhead is now going to continue chasing that person they knocked the box out of their hand with, and while they're chasing that person, somebody's gonna go pick up the box across the map and they're gonna solve it. And here's the other situation now. You don't have Franklins, you're chasing the person with the box. You hit them, you injure them, they still have the box, you chase even more, you down them, you pick up the box from them. What happens now? You pick up that survivor, and right as you hook them, the chain hunt starts. Congratulations! You can now spend time walking around looking for the box and getting ready to interrupt it again while somebody's on hook and somebody has to go and unhook. So that is basically the entire team that is going to be occupied, because someone has to go get the box, somebody has to go for the unhook, there's a player on the hook, so that essentially only leaves really one person to do anything right there, but they're not going to be able to do very much because the chain hunt is going. So that's why perks like barbecue are great, because then you can just go and find that person really easily. But yeah, that's why Franklin's was never good on Pinhead. And then everything else on this list, again, take a look at it. This is where I believe everything's going to be. Typically want to run perks that are in the A tier or S tier. Those are going to be the perks that really get you some of the best value in your games, in my opinion. And yeah, that's pretty much it for perks. And now going on to talk about the add-ons for Pinhead. I want to go ahead and pull up this picture here. This is my current most up-to-date as of the unknown chapter thoughts and opinions on what I believe to be the most accurate list from S tier all the way down to bent nail on what I believe is the most useful add-ons for Pinhead. And let me quickly break down why. So starting with S tier, the two best add-ons hands down are going to be Impaling Wire and Larry's Remains. These add-ons are absolutely uncontested on how good they are with Pinhead. Impaling Wire makes it so that whenever you snap a chain on the environment, instead of only one chain spawning back in to take its place, two will spawn in. So if you break a bunch of chains at once on the environment, a lot of them are going to spawn back in and try to grab you, and this also works on the chain hunt as well. So this is just really, really strong, and using it, you're almost always going to get at least a little value, and even just one little chain out of, let's say, 6 that spawn in that grabs someone and nabs them, that's still going to make a big difference in many, many situations. And the other add-on is Larry's Remains, one of my personal favorites, and I've used many times. Adds 2 more seconds to the box solve time. This add-on, even though it sounds like it doesn't do very much, those extra 2 seconds can be the difference between making a massive play and missing out on a large opportunity. So with those extra 2 seconds, let me tell you a couple things that can possibly happen that honestly happens quite a lot, even in my games. The first one is you hook somebody, and within the last couple of seconds, you get a teleport off. Boom. You're now instantly in chase again, and somebody's on hook, and you're pressuring up to 3 people at once, because then somebody has to go for the unhook, someone's on hook, and now you're chasing somebody. That's 3 people occupied, all because you were able to get a teleport off. I can't tell you how many times somebody solves right as I finish a hook when I didn't have this add-on. And the other big one, of course, is the fact that you can actually have the potential 2 more seconds to stop someone from solving the box and then chase them and then take the box from them, giving you a chain hunt, which, you know, is insane value. So that's why I believe these add-ons are the best add-ons for Pinhead. Whenever these show up in Pinhead's blood webs, grab them, grab them, grab them. And now going to A tier, the biggest controversial one here that I think everybody's gonna notice is that Original Pain is at the bottom of A tier. And let me tell you why. Everybody knows that this add-on is basically known as the king of camping and the king of tunneling, because you can use this on somebody that just got off hook and completely deny them of those 10 seconds of initial borrowed time that they get off hook. It denies borrowed time itself, it denies dead hard, and it denies off the record. Now, these are all really, really strong perks that you can deny with this add-on, but if you are not tunneling somebody, then this add-on really does almost nothing for you. Yes, it is a very good add-on, and I am going to recognize that, but I'm not going to put it in S tier because I don't really tunnel with this add-on very often unless I'm doing like a very specific build or a build request, but I don't really use this to tunnel. I will say though, one of the nice things that this add-on provides is the fact that if you tag somebody while they're healing, you can reset their heal with this. But I wanted to give a special attention to Original Pain, just because everybody knows this is a good add-on. And then moving on, Grease Lens, I believe is the best in the A tier. This add-on is amazing. You tag people and then you get 6 seconds of wall hacks on them. This is such a good add-on, especially with Lethal, where you can bump that 6 seconds up to 8 seconds. It's so nice because of the fact that you can tag survivors through walls and around corners, and then you just get such a long aura read on them. This add-on allows you to make so many insane plays, and you never see pinheads run it. Stop running Impaling Wire all the time and start running Grease Lens. This add-on is also just insanely fun. It's a lot easier to get value than something like Glowing Concoction, just because of the fact that you can hit people through walls with your gateways. And then moving on, Engineer's Fang. Everybody knows this add-on's insane. I don't think it's S tier. I'm just going to say that right now because of the fact that it makes your chase against injured survivors very, very weak. If you're going to run this add-on, you need at least 2 chase perks in order to make this add-on worthwhile. If you're running this add-on with 4 slowdowns, unless the survivors just decide to give up, you're probably going to get stomped. This add-on, you need to play in a very, very specific way. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well for you. Back in the PTB, when its only downside was that your gateway would take 50% longer to close after hitting a survivor. Your transition back to yourself, basically, was 50% longer, which really isn't all that long. And then they nerfed it so that it would no longer spawn 3 chains on an injured survivor, only 2. And I can tell you right now that is a huge detriment to your power. So you have to use it in a very specific way. And then the last in the A tier is the Iridescent Lament Configuration. This is basically just a passive slowdown. People are going to take longer to find the box, and you're going to get more chain hunts with this add-on. It doesn't do anything more than really just be like a super, super basic passive slowdown that doesn't directly give you slowdown, but it will eventually come into play, and somebody is going to spend an extra 20-30 seconds looking for the box, or the chain hunt's going to start and you're going to at least get a little bit of natural chain hunt ability going right there. And then Frank's Heart is one of my all-time favorites. I don't think it's an A tier add-on, but I think this add-on is really, really underrated, so I put it at the top of B tier. It pairs amazing with Larry's Remains. Get this add-on. It's really, really good. Chatterer's Tooth is also really, really strong when used in very specific builds. I think people think this is weak because of the fact it's not something that just outright buffs Pinhead's ability. It reworks it to make him have a different play style, but in those play styles, it's very, very good, so that's why I put it high up. And then Liquefied Gore is basically the weaker version of Larry's Remains, but I think the 1 second, you don't need to stack both of them, and it's a whole second less than Larry's Remains, so it's kind of degrades its potential on this list. And then C tier, I think the first 2 add-ons are going to be in this tier because they're not bad, but they're not good. They're just nice, so it's nice to have a little bit faster of a power recovery, which is the Skewered Rat and the Leather Strip. This is great for beginners. I put them right in C tier because I think this is like a right in the middle of the road. It's not good, but it's not bad. It's just going to be nice and helpful. So, and then of course I threw the Flickering Television because it's the weaker version of Frank's Heart. 4 meters instead of 8 meters on your gateway placement range. It's not bad. It's not good. The green one's better, but I threw it in there because, again, you know, honestly, 4 meters isn't terrible, and if you can't afford to get the greens, then it's not bad. And then going into the not so good tier, I put both of the turn rate add-ons, which aren't terrible, but they're really not going to do very much for you, and you're not usually getting into a situation where that turn radius means a ton. I feel like these would be way more cool if they just combined both of these into one and then increase that even more. Like, heck, just make it like 80% or something. Make it really, really crazy good. Or I wouldn't even say good, because turn rate wouldn't even be good. Just make it really, really high, and then all of a sudden it becomes at least interesting. Maybe not good, but then it becomes interesting. And then Slice of Frank, this add-on is almost pointless. It's just barely making it into the usable list, in my opinion. Everything above F tier is usable, but yeah, Slice of Frank, it's just not that good. Just don't use it. And then in the F tier, these add-ons are completely worthless. You should never run these, and I see a lot of people run the box timer add-ons, which is going to be the Torture Pillar and the Lit Candle. Don't use them. They're terrible. And then, of course, the Blood Vial and the Roach add-on, they're just worthless. There's no point. Like, you have a better add-on that does a better job. Frank's Heart does a better job than pretty much both of the Vial of Blood and the Roach add-on combined. Almost, I believe. Yeah, because it's I believe 6 additional meters if you run both of those, but Frank's Heart gives you 8 meters on your placement, your gateway placement, which is way better than your chain range because you get to control where that goes. Your chain, once you shoot that, that's pretty much going in a straight line. So you have a lot less control over that. And then, of course, you have Bent Nail, which is super duper bad. This is a meme add-on. It's, I mean, unless you want to troll, don't run it. I mean, if you're up for a challenge, you could pair it with Engineer's Fang because you're already going to be down 1 chain anyways. So more blood points, but Pinhead doesn't even really struggle at getting blood points with his deviousness category. So this is also kind of pointless. But this is my opinion. This is what I think are the best add-ons, and even in order, this is what I think are the best add-ons in my opinion. Again, there might be some different opinions out there, but this is mine as of right now. Things might change, who knows? Things always change in this game. So, yeah, that's my opinion. And I'm also going to briefly talk about this as well, because I know obviously this is going to be one of the most asked questions. I also get asked this quite a bit on my stream, and it's going to be, what builds do you suggest? Well, I'm not going to do a whole section dedicated to this because, again, you know, I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible because of the fact that I don't want it to be Odds Darva length. But I will show you a bunch of builds right now on screen. I'm going to show you a total of 14 builds that I've made. Some of them are sweaty, some of them are really fun, some of them are stealth builds. Bunch of different playstyles. The add-ons on them are just recommendations. You don't need those add-ons, but they're the ones that I suggest. So if you're looking for some custom builds, I'd recommend any of the ones on the screen here. And if you see any of these like gold perks, I'll go ahead and make sure to label the perk names because obviously you don't know what perks those are, but I do. So I'll just go ahead and add that on the screen as well. So you go ahead and pause the video if you want to try any of these builds. But these are the builds I suggest as of right now. Obviously, again, you know, if any of these perks get nerfed or changed, things might happen. But as of right now, these are some of the best builds, and most of these are going to most likely stay very consistent when it comes to how effective they are, even if some things get nerfed or changed, unless something gets like a rework like Ultimate Weapon or something like that. But again, that's, you know, a topic for a different day. But yeah, these are the builds. Go ahead and give them a peek, see which ones you might be interested in if you're looking to play Pinhead. These are the ones that I enjoy playing the most myself. And yeah, make sure to let me know how it goes. If you have a lot of luck with any of these builds, put down in the comments which build you like the most and if you made any changes or anything like that. And this leads into the final part of the video. I'm actually going to talk about Pinhead counterplay. So let's say you're playing Survivor. What can you do to actually do better against him? Well, the first thing to consider is after the Chucky update, you won't have to worry about AI chains interrupting your box solve anymore. So let's keep that in mind really fast. But before I get back to that, dealing with the box, I'm going to talk about dealing with his M2. When dealing with Pinhead's M2 in Chase, there's a few things to keep in mind. If the Pinhead is not perfectly back-revving you with the gateway every single time, it's actually incredibly easy to dodge his chain. Simply run into the gateway once it's placed, as long as he doesn't instantly shoot, which many Pinheads don't, and you can confuse him as he has to rotate his camera around very fast to actually keep track of you. You can also fake going one way and then turn the other, and as long as the chain has already hit a certain speed, he won't be able to turn it far enough to hit you, even with the turn rate add-ons, as long as you pull to the side hard enough. The next thing to consider too is when you see Pinhead's hand come up, you want to start doing really weird movements. Don't just dodge side to side, actually be weird. In fact, one of the best things to do is even run back at Pinhead. Now, I would only suggest this in dire situations or if you have some sort of a loop nearby, such as a pallet or a window, but this is actually really, really good and actually works quite a bit. And the other part to keep in mind, again, going back to the box now, is the box needs to be dealt with. Consider the box a 6th generator that needs to be accomplished. Otherwise, you can't win. It is not possible to win, especially in solo queue. So what do? One person needs to dedicate to the box. If you're in solo queue, maybe that needs to be you. Now, obviously, there are issues with dealing with Pinhead in solo queue, and the reason he has such a notorious fear factor against solo queue players because they're so terrified of having the chain hunt completely screw everything up, which it can. You need to go after the box and solve it as early as possible whenever you can. When Pinhead starts to apply a bit more pressure, you can let the timer go longer, but you want to solve it as early as you can so that it never really has a chance to become an issue. But if Pinhead is creating a lot of pressure, then you want to go ahead and let that timer delay as long as humanly possible before you go and solve it, just so that you have more time to work on gens. And very briefly, I also want to add, you should not always take hits for the person holding the box if you're in a situation where one of your teammates is getting chased. That's because it's really going to do nothing for the team if nobody is doing gens while the person with the box is getting chased and someone is coming to take hits. You don't want to take hits unless you know it's actually going to delay by an actual reasonable amount more, because the whole point of holding the box and keeping it away from Pinhead is delay the chain hunt as long as possible. You absolutely need to take this time and just slam gens, even if it's only 20-30 seconds of progress on 1 or 2 gens. That's way better than getting 0 progress on gens and basically getting the person who's holding the box downed in some shape or form just because maybe they run out of, options and get downed, or maybe something accidentally happens like a sandbag and then the chain hunt starts and Pinhead has a ton of pressure. Just let the person who's holding the box do their thing. If it looks like maybe you can run in, take a quick hit and buy them an extra 30 seconds, then go for it. But otherwise, you want to take that time to do gens. When you pick up the box, you need to consider a few things before you start solving. Is Pinhead somewhat nearby? If you hear his terror radius, might not want to solve right away, because all he has to do is walk a few feet and he should be within range to be able to hit you with his M2, especially if he has range and solve time add-ons. One thing you want to do when solving is you usually want some sort of cover in front of you, because what you really want in a situation when solving is Pinhead not being able to just directly hit you. If you have some sort of nice cover in front of you, Pinhead hitting you with his chain will be a lot harder. For example, here, there's no way I'm going to be able to hit this because I'm not able to place it fully to the side of this little junk tile on the edge of the map. So the survivor is able to actually stay completely safe while solving, and there's no way I can make it. Now, in another situation is if you do pick up the box and you know Pinhead is nearby, you're going to need to sneak a little bit. You may need to get in a locker. You may need to go ahead and walk towards a safer tile to solve. But you never want to put yourself in a situation where Pinhead perhaps just downed a player and hooked them, and now you're picking up and solving. You want to pick up and solve when he's occupied, whether it be looking for a survivor that he knows is close to him, or actively in a chase. You want to make it so that the Pinhead has to actually pick and potentially loses out on something in return. For example, when you pick up a survivor as Pinhead and the survivor starts to solve, you have the choice. You can hook and let them solve, or you can drop and you can TP. Either way, you're losing out on something. You're either losing out on getting into a chase instantly, or you're losing out on hooking the survivor. You want to give Pinhead those choices, and the more difficult those choices, the better you're going to be. And the last part of counterplay to talk about with Pinhead is if you pick up the box if a chain hunt is already active and the Pinhead is box hunting, you want to hide. And by hide, I mean actually try to find a locker and get into it, because the chains can actually give you away very easily. It's actually partly a tracking tool for Pinhead, indirectly, but it is tracking because of the fact that you can see the chains spawn in, you can hear them as Pinhead. So if you're walking around a tile and you hear a chain spawn in, there's a person there. So you want to actually hide and delay as much as you can. The whole point of dealing with the box is just delaying the chain hunt in every way possible and giving your teammates time to do gens. That is the biggest part of dealing with Pinhead. And then, of course, when it comes to the M2, like I said earlier, you want to play sporadically. You want to make it so that he can't just very easily M2 you or back rev you or hit you with some fancy chain. You want to play weird. You want to pay attention to the signs. His hand comes up. You hear the gateway spawn. You see the gateway spawn. It's all just reacting towards the things that he's doing. And the last little extra section that I also want to add to the end of this video are little tidbits of information that are interesting or useful that I didn't think were directly important to add to any particular section, but I still wanted to add anyways. And the first one's actually going to be the fact that Pinhead gets a lot of blood points in a trial. He is one of the best blood point killers in the game. A lot of people always ask, oh, which killers are good for farming blood points? Now, every killer has a cap, so there isn't really a killer that allows you to farm more, but there are killers that get better deviousness points. So Pinhead is actually one of those killers because of the fact that by binding a survivor with a chain and then hitting them gets you a lot of points. Teleporting gives you a good chunk of points, picking up the box, etc., and also a very special scoring event called the Lament Guardian scoring effect. So at the end of every match, as long as a survivor does not actually steal the box out of the trial, you will get the Lament Guardian scoring effect, and you will get those bonus 2,500 points no matter what. And you can also stack this because for some reason in endgame collapse, for every survivor that you hook in the endgame, you will also get that scoring effect. And it's for each hook stage as well. So let's say you are in endgame collapse and there's one survivor left because you closed the hatch. You're not quite at max blood points for deviousness category yet, but you hook this person and they still have 3 hook stages. You will get one 2,500 blood point scoring event in Lament Guardian for hooking them in the end game. You will then get it again when they go second stage, and then you'll get it a third time when they die on hook. And then you will get it a 4th time when the trial actually ends. So you could essentially go an entire match by doing nothing at all and in endgame get a single kill on one person and actually still get a lot of blood points. I don't know why it works like this, but it does, and it's really funny. Another thing also is that Nancy's perk, which was for a while not Nancy's perk and a default game perk, but became Nancy's perk again when Stranger Things came back, is that her perk Fixated actually kind of counters Pinhead because of the fact that it increases walking speed, and when you are hit by chains, you actually are put into walking speed, and then that speed is decreased depending on how many chains are attached to you, but this perk actually makes it so that you move slightly quicker. I wish they would change this because it's a bit annoying when someone is able to walk around a corner slightly quicker and remove their chains, but it is something to keep in mind. Also, to keep in mind, Pinhead's vaulting sound is almost completely silent. This wasn't something I felt very necessary to include in any other part of the video, but I did want to mention it. Pinhead's vault is very quiet, so being able to use the shack window to double or triple vault in and out of the shack actually works a lot because of the fact that survivors just can't hear, especially during the chase music playing, the slight, very quiet sound that plays when Pinhead vaults, and it usually gets you a lot of hits, so you can take advantage of this by doing weird vaults in chase, and people usually won't end up actually hearing you, and it works out and can get you down. Another piece of information as well is that the gateway that Pinhead has actually has a texture of the box on it. A lot of people, for some reason, don't know this. A lot of people who've played Pinhead that I've made play Pinhead, when they look at it, they become surprised that there's a little art piece on it. But take a look at it. It's pretty cool. It spins around a little bit. It's just a nice little thing that they added that looks really nice. And I just thought was a nice little touch to mention as well. And lastly, the fact that also while you're in chase, this isn't something I do all the time, but actually can be helpful in chase. And I didn't find it this as super helpful tip as other tips, so that's why I'm including it here. But because of the fact that when Pinhead nods, his entire torso also moves up and down, you can look down in chase in some loops. And because of the fact that Pinhead is so tall, but his entire torso moves, that when he looks up and down, you can look down and his head will actually dip a decent chunk lower, and you can actually use this to take advantage of some loops where people can just see the top of your head and end up mind gaming them and getting a hit on someone. But I also wanted to include it. But other than that, that's pretty much how you play Pinhead. It's not super duper complicated, but as long as you are dedicating towards the box, he's just a 1v1 killer, and then all you need are teammates that just sit on gens. But at the end of the day, in something like solo queue, that doesn't always happen, and you kind of just have to accept that. This is my entire Pinhead guide. I hope this helps out some people out there, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.